thought I would share some stuff about my own endings in life and how impactful they've been, as endings are.
I don't know about you, but I've always struggled with endings, even the small ones. Finishing books, moving house, ending seasons of my life. Lately I've been thinking about all of those endings, and within that, all the kinds, the dramatic ones, the quiet ones, the ones we don't talk about enough. Like, for example, the end of a version of yourself you didn't even realise you'd outgrown, or when a relationship fades and you're left carrying feelings with nowhere to put them, or when your child grows up a little more, and as each phase appears, suddenly you're closing a chapter you didn't know was the last page. We act like endings are supposed to be neat, but honestly most of them are just confusing. And even if we are expecting them, they can seem to creep up on us and materialise straight out of the blue. They take longer than we think, they change us more than we expect, and they don't come with instructions. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realised I do the same thing with my art. I'll start a painting, fall in love with the process, and then avoid finishing it. Not because I'm stuck, although sometimes that does happen, but because the ending feels like saying goodbye to the version of me who started it. So in today's video, I thought I'd like to talk about all that, about finishing things, closings, letting go of what was, and why endings in art and in life are often the hardest part. And also show you what I've been working on in the studio lately, because I finally finished a painting I've been avoiding for the best reasons.
Well, I'm all togged up today with layers and layers of thermals and jumpers and woolies and stuff because the heating is not getting fixed until Wednesday. Of course, the weather here in England has decided to take a turn for the super cold. I'm currently at about 15 degrees in here because I've got a little oil-filled radiator, so the heat is getting up from what was 12. Anyway, I cut my finger, so that's why I keep fiddling with it. It's almost stopped bleeding. Anyway, nothing serious, just a little scratch, so don't worry. And I'm always having little mishaps because I'm clumsy. You'll have to let me know if you relate to that one. Anyway, I was thinking about, because I'd finished my painting, the little study, it's still wet, so I've got to be a little bit aware of that. And I've also put out my watercolour. Every time I stand up or sit down on this chair, you'll hear squeaks, so I'll try and edit those out. So here's the watercolour version, and I've been sat pondering on my paintings and the fact that I've kind of finished with this little study of Hylas and the Nymphs. So if you've been here a while, you might know I've been having a good look at JW Waterhouse for quite a few months now, specifically details from this painting in my sketchbook and some paintings, and I'm coming to the close, so I'm coming to an ending. And it got me thinking about 4 o'clock this morning, inevitably, as life and our creativity intertwines. It happens, doesn't it? You'll have to let me know. I'd love to hear in the comments how this works for you. But it's got me thinking about endings and letting go, you know, when things in life come to a close. And what a ginormous emotional process that can be. I just thought I would put the camera on, have a little chat about it, because I know that we can all relate to endings and beginnings. It's also the waning moon. We've got the new moon in a couple of days. So I think that can take you down into the dark. And if you don't relate to the moon astrology and working with the moon, then just ignore this part. But for me, I find it a real help and support to work with the moon cycles, because that fits in with female cycles and natural cycles, and I love all that stuff. So it just helps me work out my stuff, if you like. I thought I would maybe share some stuff about my own endings in life and how gigantic and enormous and impactful they've been, as endings are. And it can be something simple, like this weekend, for example, I finished a book that I was really enjoying called The Mermaid Chair. So I'll put a little thing up there about it. It's quite a heart-wrenching book, but it's a really lovely story at the same time, quite an emotional journey for the characters. And then of course there's the huge endings and closures that happen, maybe when we lose a loved one or we let go of a friendship or relationship, and those kind of endings. So I just thought I would go through a few of my universally human endings. I suppose in the last few months I've been sharing more and more on here, and I really like the relationships and the conversations that creates down there. So if you relate, or if you've got a story that you would like to share, please feel welcome to leave a comment, because we all love to read them. And if you're going through something right now, then it can be, quite a lovely support to have that community as well. We love that, don't we? So I kind of keep looking down here because I've made a little list of things just so I don't go off on a Wendy waffle and a tangent too much, which I do tend to do around here, don't I? So I'll try not to do that, and I'll try to sort of skip through and maybe embellish a few of the stories when I've, when some memories come up for me. I never truly script or plan these videos, but I do like to have kind of a rough list of things to talk about, so just excuse me if I'm looking down at my list. The first thing I've got is about ending of romantic relationships, because that can be super heart-stopping and obviously totally life-changing as well. And I think whether it's a healthy relationship or an unhealthy relationship, it means us letting go of a version of ourselves that we were with that person. And so there's a heck of a lot of untangling and letting go that goes along with that. And it might also be enmeshed with other friendships and mean that, loyalties of other friendships go with the other person and not you. So you're letting go of your entanglement in all that. And I had definitely a couple of relationships like that. And yeah, it's probably took me years to get over a couple of my previous relationships like that, because it felt like, and it literally was, the beginning of a whole new life for me. And within that, there's that emotional, painful hangover that you have to process and try and put things back together and heal afterwards. And only time can help us do that, of course, because things take time to unfold and unravel. And I remember moving towns, and that really helped, because it really helped me have a new beginning afterwards. But again, I was letting go of all my attachments in that town as well. And even if we have an awareness that things really needed to come to a close because, perhaps it was really unhealthy for both parties, I think certainly true in my younger days where, I had so much unhealed childhood trauma stuff that I hadn't looked at. At this point I'm a completely different person, so maybe I would have made different decisions and done things differently. But at the same time, you can't beat up the person that you were, and it's more coming to a place of acceptance and understanding and compassion for that person as well. And that for me is a really important part of the process of healing up afterwards. And when we finish, maybe a painting or a creative project, and I finished a painting, but I also feel like I've finished the chunk of my project, which is looking at mermaids, nymphs, that kind of thing. But I feel like it's the end of a chapter, for myself as well, because it's my creative journey works in parallel with my life. This is me going sort of in the underneath layers, maybe to heal a few more layers to do with my endings and my letting goes and my closures. And I know I've been talking about this quite a lot on here recently, the letting go aspect of things, but it's not just a case of we do it once, twice, 3 times. It's a continual process, isn't it? So, and it's hard work. It can take a lot of energy, and even though it's really worthy and worthwhile work, it's not the easiest thing, is it? So I think I've been looking at things related to my childhood, wounds that I had, way back when I was little, looking at the patterns that maybe then I couldn't see that I had, but now I'm able to recognise that, sort of pull back, be the eagle on the perch, if you like, the eagle in the sky, and really see a big part of my identity that I outgrew. I think there's endings of chapters where we're living a completely different life. So for me, the thing that comes into mind as an example of that would be when I, was in my teaching career and we had a house and a mortgage and a whole life. And James and I decided that we just didn't want that. We wanted our freedom, and so we sold everything, put some stuff into storage, and ran away in a van for several years. And there's a whole few videos about that, so maybe I'll link one up there if you're interested in that part of the story and you've not been here before to hear it. But that was, not just leaving a career, leaving routines that, once defined me as a human being, and also the endings of certain friendships that at the time felt irreplaceable as well, because you drift apart, you go in different directions, not just emotionally, mentally, but obviously, you know, geographically as well, and that makes a heck of a difference, doesn't it? I think geography plays such an important part in so many of our relationships. And indeed, my closest, oldest best friend, who unfortunately I lost a few years ago, which was another ending, of course. We have to talk about grief in that, and overcoming those kind of losses is, you know, a very big part of this. But that friend, she lived next door to me for a lot of my sort of younger childhood, and so our back gardens had like a little hole in the fence at the bottom of the garden, so we could go into each other's gardens. And yeah, next door, it was so easy, so we didn't really have to make too many arrangements, which was good in my household because things were a bit complicated. Also, it just meant that, you know, we could pop next door, and you know, our parents weren't too worried about where we were in that sense, so it made it as easy as possible, even though things were a little bit complicated. And within that whole same scenario, the ending of a home. And we put a lot into our homes, you know, we nest, it's our safe sanctuary, physical space, protection from the elements and everything else that's out there. And so leaving a home, I mean, they say it's one of the most stressful things to experience, isn't it, moving house? But the ending of a home and saying goodbye, I've always said thank you to the house and a goodbye, because even if I hadn't really enjoyed living in the place for various reasons, which isn't necessarily to do with the house or the home or the flat in itself, but it's a really big let go, because you are saying goodbye to years and years of memories within those spaces that you're, you know, inevitably actually leaving, and you're not going to step in those rooms, on those stairs, have that whole routine, that experience of light, and the memories that evokes in that space as well. So you're letting go of a heck of a lot, and we can certainly feel grief for all of that, you know, even when it comes down to, you know, like the sounds that we used to hear when we woke up in the morning. And if I think about my house that we had before van life days, it was the most beautiful. It wasn't a big mansion or anything like that, but it was a 3-bedroom semi-detached. Had a big garden, and we had like a really nice growing area for veggies and a greenhouse. It was, you know, really pretty house as well. I think I have put some pictures up in previous videos of this house as well, so I'll try and link something in the description box below. That house had beautiful light, and we used to have like a conservatory on the house that we could use most of the year. Yeah, I used to do a lot of art in there, a lot of creating, and a lot of sitting and pondering. So yeah, I've got very happy memories of that place. And I remember sort of, you know, touching the walls and being really having conversations with the house to say, you know, it was time, and I hope that the house, you know, felt loved and had some happy things to come with the next people that were coming in. And they were quite a younger couple, and they were going to bring children into the world and stuff. So I think they've since had a family living there, which makes me really happy that the house will be happy. Is that silly? I don't know. I don't know if it sounds silly, but to me, it was important that I did that, and that I didn't just reject the house in my last sort of few months in there, because it was really, really difficult to leave that house. I think another big one that maybe isn't talked about as much is letting go of dreams, things that we dreamed of, that we really thought that we wanted. And there is a quiet grief in that, of letting that go, because you come to a decision and you kind of hang on to something, and maybe it forms what you think is part of your identity, but then you move away from that, and letting go of the part that relates to your identity of that dream can be really, really hard, but, you know, really important as well. But there is definitely a difficulty and a sadness with letting go of a dream. And I think, you know, for me, I definitely had a dream of, you know, happy families in my childhood. And, you know, unfortunately, my parents separated and got divorced. So that was when I was around 10 years old, but that was brewing for a long time before that. And then I had a dream that I wanted to, you know, create a happy stable relationship and family. And for me, that didn't work out as well, because when I had my daughter, I ended up as a single mum for several years afterwards. The first sort of 7 or 8 years I was on my own. And so that is not my ideal, and it certainly wasn't what I dreamed of. So I had a lot of grief around that, and I think I still do, actually, if I'm really honest. In fact, I know I do. I have grief around that, I think, in relation to, you know, how that then impacts on the next generation and, you know, my own child. So, and I think another dream that I let go of was my artwork, and I came back to it. So that was quite an interesting process, because I had the whole dream of, you know, being an artist, and then I had to let that go because I couldn't pay my bills. And, you know, I had a daughter to support as well. So I went into teaching. And yes, there was a big part of me that loved that and loved elements of it, but there was also lots of elements of it that I really didn't like. And a lot of the environments were pretty toxic, especially in my first school. Yeah, some of it was very difficult. I realised slowly but surely that my dream of being a creative and painting mainly, I'm a painter, wasn't something that I could let go of for any longer. It became intolerable, actually. But then at the same time, I had to let go of my dream I had around teaching. I had an idealistic dream of that. You know, I wanted to bring in, and did bring in, you know, peer massage, the Swedish peer massage program, and I brought that into the whole school. And I also used to do meditation and yoga with the children, and lots of really wonderful mindfulness practices to slow things down as much as I could. But I still, you know, I had to be swept along by the curriculum needs and demands and assessments and all that other stuff. So, you know, I had to push the children because I was getting pushed from upstairs, and the upstairs were getting pushed from their upstairs, and it was just, you know, inevitably led to many of my colleagues, and myself included. I hear lots of stories from other teachers as well, ex-teachers that burnt out. So, and I put my story up. Ooh, emergency vehicle, sorry. Yeah, I put my story up on here a few months ago, I believe. So yeah, I might link a few videos down there that I mentioned, or maybe up there, just, you know, we'll see. I think the outcome of that, though, is realising it's okay to release something that just, it doesn't fit anymore. You know, it's like going through your wardrobe and finding things that don't fit. Just, it's okay to release them and let them go, and create that space for the new things to come in. You know, that's exciting. And around the build up towards the new moon, the waning balsamic period, it's a really good time to go through your cupboards and drawers and wardrobes and, yeah, let things go if you can. And then at the new moon, sit and, you know, write all your wishes and your new dreams. It does come full circle, of course. Everything, as my mum always says, everything comes out in the wash. And in my experience, it always has. And I've got stuff that hasn't come out in the wash yet. But I know, and I have faith, because I trust what my mum says and my own past experiences of it, that it will come out in the wash as well. Because there's certain sort of relationships that I'm like, well, maybe that can be rekindled at some point. And things like we come in and out of the dreams, we can come in and out, ebb and flow in relationships as well. And that can take a really, really long time. But for me, I'm a little bit cynical, but I'm also a forever optimist. And I like to live with hope, current acceptance, but also a little flicker of hope on the horizon as well, because it keeps me going. I like to have something on the horizon to look forward to, and you never know the miracles that are around the corner. So the other big endings that I have experienced, I don't know whether this is unusual or not, you'll have to let me know in the comments, but when I came to the end of my pregnancy, when I was having my daughter, and then after she was born, I really missed my baby bump. And I really missed the fact that, I used to love the fact that she was, you know, safe in my womb, and that nothing could happen to her. She was completely safe and sound and warm and cozy and cocooned, ultimately cocooned. And so I really missed that. I guess tenderness in that transition as well, and the closeness that I felt. That obviously I couldn't put her back ever, you know. I don't know if this sounds a bit silly. And I think the other time I really noticed it, I mean, there are stages when they're growing up, aren't they? And you sort of have to let go of that little stage and then they grow up. I mean, you've got to be okay with that, of course. And it can be surrounded by a little bit of sadness and grief for those little girl days or the toddler days. And, you know, even though some of it's obviously hard as well. And I certainly felt that because I was on my own a lot of the time. And I was really on the breadline as well. I didn't have much income at all, so that was a very difficult time. But now looking back, it's precious, absolutely precious, isn't it? And so the next time I really felt that was probably empty nest syndrome. That one I'm sure many of us can relate to, because it shifts our identity. There's a quiet, a loss, a gaping hole. It's like you have to sort of stretch your love so it's more out there instead of it being more contained. Of course, you don't see them as often as you were, you know, every day you'd see them. And yeah, that created a real hole for me. And then there was sort of going within and looking at my own identity shift as well. It takes on a different parental role for a child that's out there in the world themselves and beautifully independent, being proud as well of them for finding their own way in life and their own path. But it was a sticky one for me. I think I can't have this conversation, you know, without thinking about the fact that we lose people that have really, you know, shaped our lives. And I had a period a few years ago now, about 5 years ago, where I lost quite a few people consecutively. They were close people as well. So it was lots of people that had shaped my life in a really big way, had been in my life for a really, really long time as well. Almost like anchors. And I think because it was so consecutive, a couple of them were big surprises as well. So very out of the blue. So there was the shock there as well. But it was learning how the endings and the closure of that helped me rearrange myself. So I would say there's certain things that I will never get over. And it's almost like, you know, you don't want to let go of all your grief, because then does that mean you don't love them anymore? So it's quite a complex situation, but it sort of showed me how I could rearrange myself on the inside so I could still function and feel okay. Yeah, it was all discombobulated and then shaken up, and lots of gaps and sadness, of course, but the process of, you know, putting that back together obviously makes us stronger. It also makes us really compassionate and empathetic towards other people that have, you know, are going through or have gone through loss. And for me, the way I experience grief in that way, big grief, is it's like it's waves. So it ebbs and it flows, and it doesn't really matter how long ago, you know, things happened. I don't want to go into too much detail, obviously, because it's really, really personal. And also, I'm not sure how much I can actually say on YouTube as well without, I don't know, getting edited out or something, I don't know. But at the same time, I know you know what I'm talking about, because obviously we all experience this loss in our lives. And I'm talking specifically about, you know, sort of the emotional aftermath of an ending, a door closing. In those situations, my journal, you know, is definitely my best friend for sure. And, you know, I can look back on my journal entries. If things ebb up again, if things pop up, the waves come over me again. And it can happen at the most unexpected times as well, can't it? So, yeah, soft hugs if you're going through big grief, because, yeah, we feel you, we do. One of the things that I have experienced so much now because of van life days is the ending of belonging somewhere. And so when we were travelling in the van, and I think I've mentioned this on here a few times, I was really seeking home, and we were looking for somewhere where we wanted to put roots down. In actual fact, that was kind of the loose no plan to, you know, explore and see if maybe we wanted to move abroad. We were pondering on living in Greece, and we were pondering on living in Portugal. Those were the two places that really popped out for us. It didn't end up that way. as you probably know if you've been here a little while. But those processes of leaving a community, leaving familiarity, just even, your local supermarket and that kind of routine, leaving a city or a town that you really love, and even leaving a part of yourself that's held in that identity of place. But I became really I became really adept at this because we were travelling and moving quite a lot, and so we fairly slow travelled, and sometimes we were in a place, maybe 4 nights, 5 nights, which was quite fast for us, but other times we were in places, maybe 6-8 weeks, or we were in Italy, for example, for a couple of months, and then we were in Greece for 5 months, we were in Spain for 6, Portugal for 6, and so you can build in that time. You can, if you're kind of in that mentality as well and in that rhythm, you can very quickly build up what feels like building up a life for you and feeling like a sense of belonging somewhere else. And so, yeah, I got quite good at the endings of leaving somewhere and having to begin again a lot. And it was very discombobulating, and I didn't love it, I have to be honest. It wasn't easy for me. It wasn't a natural thing to me to do that. I'm a Taurus moon, so I was seeking stability, roots, a home, somewhere I could call my own little sanctuary nest, if you like. So it didn't really work for me. But I didn't know that until I did it. So I'm just going to mention a couple more things before, I stop talking to you, because I think I've been talking for far too long. But I often think about things ending that we don't realise they're ending until we look back and they're gone. And so it might be days in a summer before, so the final summer in the house, for example, before we moved into the van, I look back at that summer and the garden really with very fond, special, precious memories, because I didn't know things were going to change quite how they did. Or, even the feelings I had when I was a little girl and I was growing up, and I went into sort of between 7 and 10 years old, and then went into my teens. Those kind of moments and letting go of that person, and then obviously you grow up, you change. Motherhood, which goes through phases, doesn't it, depending on how old your children are, relationships, routines, and what can feel like sometimes a really sort of boring, mundane situation. When you look back at it, it's often with rosy-coloured specs as well, of course. But when you look back at it, it's like, I didn't know that was ending at that point. So we can take things for granted, can't we? I think that's my point there. A moment can become a last without any warning at all. So we need to live in the moment, and we need to be grateful and really notice and savour the tiny little things, don't we? So if you need that reminder, I need to remind myself of that all the time. There can be some life moments that make you see differently, and so it can be, the ending of your innocence or naivety. I used to be very naive, I have to say. Then there's the whole becoming of the new you, of, emerging out of that. It's a sadness, but it's also a really beautiful thing as well, because it's all about growing and being that work in progress that I keep talking about on here. We're always a work in progress. And I was thinking about this in relation to my paintings as well, because these two versions of the Hylas and the Nymphs, I did my best. I worked as hard as I could to, this one more colour mixing and this one more the feeling of water, because obviously the mediums have, completely different properties to them as well. Watercolour is very different to oils. Point here is that I really feel I worked hard and I did my absolute best. But in painting, I know that in maybe 2 months' time, I might look back at these and be like, I missed that, and I could have added this, and I shouldn't have painted that like that. And you learn so much by doing, and so I know in 2 months I'll have moved forward from that, and I will be striving to improve even more. So it's like in life, you never actually get to the place, the journey is the destination, and I feel that relates so strongly with endings, as well as the fact that it's a beginning as well, because it's the beginning of the next layer of, in painting sense or creative sense, learning the next steps to do the next skills or the next techniques, whatever that might be. Does that make sense? And in that way, our life is always a work in progress, the self-development journey, as well as, you know, our creative learning journey as well. We can always do better. And I always love the Maya Angelou quote as well, you know, when we know better, we do better. And I apply that to everything in life as well, especially when it's things that I look back on and I think, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I had done that differently. You don't know better, then you can't do better, but you can now, so you can kind of put things, you know, into perspective that way, instead of beating yourself up all the time, which I've talked about here before. I'd like to end this conversation maybe on a lighter note, and also on a positive note, because I think when we get into a certain frame of mind, it can really support us to, you know, read a certain book or watch a movie or listen to some music indeed. But I think it relates more to movies and books for me. But when you get to the end credits or the last few pages in your book, it can feel like a real sadness and a loss and a closing, can't it? The stories awaken parts of us, and I sometimes feel an ache after the end because it's a comfort to be within that story. Sometimes it relates a little bit and you feel like emotive towards it, but it gives you an escape from your own stuff, or you know, you really get emotionally involved, you know, with the characters and with the story as well. We're human beings and we relate very closely to storytelling, don't we? So the last thing I just wanted to say about this was how endings can be really a positive thing as well. And so I noticed recently, and I put a little reel up on my Instagram or my other socials as well, about, you know, realizing I wasn't in survival mode anymore. And I've been doing a lot of work on in my art journaling. So if you've been in my art journaling pockets tier on Patreon, you will know this already, but a lot about letting go, but also a lot about acceptance. So it's almost like the serenity prayer, where you've got to learn the things you can let go of and learn the things you can't change, and the acceptance and healing that goes along around that. So that's when the healing begins, and there is a close and a strange grief that can go along with that, because you're leaving behind maybe certain coping mechanisms that we, you know, feel protected by. But for me, it was the end of, you know, being in an emotional survival mode, and so that was a really positive ending as well. So I just wanted to say something really positive, because some of that can be quite intense. Anyway, I hope it's okay that I shared all that, and obviously it's a video so you can skip past things as well, but I do feel a real connection, and I feel like it's important to share our stuff, if you like, because then we don't feel so alone. And again, it's another layer of sharing our stories, and, you know, down in the comments as well, I shall get my cup of tea and get cozy down there and read your comments as well, because our stories matter. They really do.
I used to think endings meant I'd failed at something, but now I'm learning they're just part of being human. We outgrow things, we change, we move on, even when it hurts. So if you're going through your own ending right now, I hope you know you're not alone. Endings are hard, but you're stronger than you know, and whatever you're stepping into next, I hope it meets you gently. And as always, thanks so much for watching and keeping me company. Keep your lights shining as bright as you can, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.